Welcome to Handmade History. Hello, welcome to episode 7. I'm Alicia.
I'm Sonia.
And today we're going to talk about Berea College, specifically about the crafts that people at Berea College made and sold through a project called Fireside Industries. We'll also talk about the push and pull between the college and the people who made the crafts and how mountain crafts in this area evolved. And we'll also talk about Anna Ernberg, a Swedish immigrant who is largely responsible for Fireside Industries' success. But first, we want to take a moment to say thank you for listening. I cannot believe we are on our 7th episode. Sonia, do you?
No, this year's flown by.
All right, so on to the show. So first of all, how we came to this topic. I came across Berea College while I was researching brooms. I was searching for handmade American brooms or something like that, and I found Berea College's Log House Craft Gallery. And then when we were talking about what to do, Sonia, you thought that it looked cool.
Yeah. I mean, we kind of get into why, but it just seemed like a unique college and kind of an interesting spot to go into.
Yeah. So it turns out that Berea College is home to, quote, the country's longest continuously operating broomcraft workshop. So we mentioned at the end of our last episode about brooms that after commercial broom making left New England, one of the places it went next was Appalachia, and that is where Berea College is.
Berea College is a liberal arts college in rural Kentucky, and it's notable for a few reasons. First, it is one of a few work colleges in the U.S. This means that students are required to work as part of their education. Another well-known one is Warren Wilson. There are only 8 in the country. They are required to work 80 hours each semester if they live on campus.
And the broom workshop and the crafts at the log cabin gallery are part of that, and we'll get to that in a minute.
Second, Berea College began in 1855 by John G. Fee. And from the beginning, it admitted Black and white students, men and women, making it the first integrated co-educational school in the South.
Pretty cool.
And third, Berea College is free. There is no tuition above what students get in grants and scholarships. It was low cost from the beginning, but it was tuition free starting in 1892.
So it's a very interesting place. And we're really going to focus on the history of crafts, especially weaving at Berea College. But I thought we would start by talking about what is going on there today. So today there's a program called Student Crafts, and the Student Crafts program is connected to the work program. Students can do this as part of their work hours. And it includes a bunch of different crafts. There's woodcraft, weaving, broomcraft, ceramics, and outreach. The crafts are designed by master craftspeople who work at the college. They are also designed with input from the students. And the crafts that they make are really elevated and beautiful. They are in the Design Within Reach catalog, which is extremely classy, and at the High Museum in Atlanta, and also at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. And they are also for sale at the Log House Craft Gallery.
So how did crafts become a part of the college? This wasn't John G. Fee's original vision. His main goal was to provide an education to everyone.
So we mentioned that the tuition was low in the early years of Berea College, but it was not nothing. And students in this part of rural Kentucky did not have a lot of cash. Many came from self-sufficient mountain homes.
So the school began buying coverlets and other handwoven products from the students' mothers to offset the cost of tuition for students. They said this in their recruiting letters, quote, each girl must send in $1 now to engage a room and bring as much as $11 with her. To help her make up this money, the college will buy good homespun linen at about 40 cents a yard, linsey and jeans at 50 cents, dress flannel 60, coverlids $4, pair wool blankets $5.
And I checked, and I believe linsey is a type of linen. Sonia, have you ever heard of linsey?
No.
Yeah, I never had either. So, but if anybody has better info on linsey, you can email us.
And this recruiting letter was written in 1897. However, interestingly, most women at this point did not weave their own fabric.
So we'll take a brief detour to talk about weaving in this area. A really great resource that I found was a book called Weavers of the Southern Highlands by Phyllis Alvick. And she wrote that by 1915, so less than 20 years after this like recruiting letter, most of the weavers were old and lived remotely. And she mentioned some of these last weavers in the area, and I think we could call them like subsistence weavers. Basically, these are some of the last Appalachian weavers who grew up learning weaving from their families, from their mothers and grandmothers, and did it to clothe their families and communities.
So some of them were the Walker sisters. There were 5 of them, but 7 sisters in total. And these 5 wove in the 1930s in their cabin, even after their home was absorbed by the Great Smoky Mountains National Park.
I think that's so awesome.
Yeah.
In Avery County, North Carolina, a really interesting document was written by a man named Jake Carpenter. He would keep track of deaths and would always write down little facts about the people who had died, like what their jobs were or who made good whiskey. And so he wrote down the deaths of these women and noted that they were weavers.
So there was Peg Chatham, a spinner and weaver who died in 1896, Minnie English, a weaver who died in 1895, Frankie Burleson, a weaver and spinner who died in 1896, and Lily Wiseman, who, quote, spun and wove all the clothing her family wore, who died in 1875.
Yes. So I thought we would memorialize these women because they're pretty cool. And after the Civil War, most women bought fabric for their families. It was much cheaper because of industrialism. This period was boom time for fabric mills in the U.S.
And women were happy to leave their weaving practice behind. Looms took up a lot of space. Weaving took a lot of time, both to learn and to do. And homespun fabric was seen as old-fashioned, something that low-income country people would wear. A quote from the Berea Quarterly in 1900, there was, quote, a feeling among the people that these noble industries were old-fashioned and something rather to be ashamed of.
And the noble industries that they're talking about there are hand spinning and hand weaving. So when the college started to buy the hand weaving from mothers living in the mountains, they found that it wasn't good quality because the mothers no longer had the skills. They also used synthetic dyes, which at that time were not very good. And I think that this is very interesting because the people at Berea College, the administration, they live among the mountain folks. The college is in the mountains, and the professors and president would go around and visit families, so they knew them. And so they would know like what skills they would have. So to explain why the college would ask the families for weaving when they knew that maybe they didn't spend a lot of time doing that anymore, we have to talk a bit about a group of people called mountain workers.
So mountain workers were like social workers. They were often from out of town, and they would move to the mountains and try to help the people living there. John G. Fee was not a mountain worker, but the president at this time, William Goodall Frost, shared many of their traits. Frost was born in New York and educated at Oberlin. To people in the cities of the Northeast, the people of rural Appalachia were seen as backward, impoverished, and in need of modernization. Frost wrote in an article for The Atlantic, quote, today there are in the southern mountains people, Americans for 4 and 5 generations, who are living to all intents and purposes in the conditions of the colonial times. He says, quote, these fellow countrymen of ours are in need of a friendly interpreter. And later, they are an anachronism.
So it was the case that mountain folks lived differently from people in the Northeast and were often low income. So one source I read called Southern Appalachia at this time, sparsely populated, non-industrial, and very largely rural. The people here would live on self-sufficient farms, but they did not have much cash and often didn't have access to modern conveniences like electricity. However, there was this thing that happened in Appalachia that was kind of like a tug of war. The mountain workers saw a need for more money for the families, especially for women, but they didn't want the mountain people to let go of their way of life.
The mountain workers and Frost felt a nostalgia for the skills that people in cities no longer had. So the mountain workers wanted to get more money to these families to give them more access to education, especially, but they didn't want to disturb what they perceived as this idyllic country existence.
And so the mountain workers thought the solution is do the mountain crafts for money. These competing desires of the mountain workers and Frost are what inspired what would eventually become Fireside Industries, and then that evolved into student craft. However, I would like to pause for a minute to talk about what the mountain people wanted here, because I feel like often stories like this get told about a cultural practice being saved. And I think sometimes we forget that the savers also chose to let go of their own cultural practices. So the mountain workers who came from cities in the Northeast had let go of their own cultural practices of weaving, spinning, dyeing, and so on. And it's important to remember that the mountain people who decided not to weave were choosing to do exactly the same thing that the mountain workers' ancestors had chosen to do maybe a generation or two before. So the two groups of people in this way are actually very similar. Everyone wants more leisure time. It's incredibly difficult to hold on to a practice that you don't like to do, or that is time consuming, or that takes a lot of skill. And that's not something that a lot of people want to do, just like for fun or in their free time.
So bringing it back to what we were talking about earlier with the college, the interesting thing about Berea College is they preserve the skills of mountain crafts by making them an economically viable choice. In this process of preserving, many skills and patterns were literally revived and recorded for future generations. However, in this process, the practice itself also changed. Who made the crafts, how they made the crafts, who bought and used the crafts, and what items were made all changed. So it's not so much of a revival of the craft as an evolution of it.
So how did they do it? How did Berea College revive and preserve mountain crafts like weaving? So I read a great quote, which I'm paraphrasing here. Weaving shifted from personal or community use to a method of income generation. And in order to do this, the college tried a bunch of different things. First, they held a homespun fair in 1896 to celebrate handcrafts. It was chaired by Mrs. K.U. Putnam, and it was held at commencement. And people could buy or sell handcrafts. And there were also prizes for weaving, natural dye formulas, baskets, knitting, woodworking, and leatherwork. And the goal was to celebrate the mountain crafts. But by 1909, the chair, Mrs. Putnam, complained all the same people kept winning the prizes. So the skills were not growing or spreading.
Next, Susan Hayes set up a weaving operation at the school. She was the mother of several students. She worked in a house owned by the college. She gave out supplies and new materials, and she also bought handmade goods.
So this was a first attempt by the college to improve quality. Hayes was trying to control the quality of materials used and to improve the quality of materials. And my understanding is that her house was also kind of like a demonstration house where people could come watch and learn from her weaving.
Hayes worked with Josephine Robinson, a professor of mathematics, head of the ladies' department, and also a weaver. They started working together by traveling to buy handmade goods. Robinson eventually became chair of Homespun Industries in 1898. Under the auspices of Homespun Industries, Robinson raised money to fund the operation, traveled to Brooklyn, Rochester, Providence, Chicago, St. Paul, Minneapolis, and Buffalo. And she also wrote a pamphlet called Repair That Loom.
I really just love the title of that pamphlet, Repair That Loom.
Yeah.
I feel like it so captures like what was going on at the time.
Yeah. Like, we know it's broken.
Like, you know it exactly. You know it's broken. Dig out that old loom your grandma had. Let's repair it.
Let's do it.
So the goal here was to raise funds to buy better materials and expand operations, and to develop a market for handmade goods outside of Appalachia, as well as to revive interest in these crafts, especially weaving. And Homespun Industries soon became Fireside Industries. There was an 1899 article in Berea Quarterly, which was actually a reprint of an old article in the Outlook magazine, where President Frost mentioned the Fireside Industries of past ages.
Also in 1902, Candice Wheeler, an interior designer from New York, visited. She was also a weaver and a proponent of the arts and crafts movement. She suggested products for the college to sell, and she also ran workshops.
So this is the first time we see the college starting to bring in people to teach the mountain people about what were called mountain crafts, which is kind of interesting. From 1901 to 1903, Hetty Wright Graham was the full-time weaving director for the college. She was from Flushing, New York, and she coordinated 20 spinners and weavers. She also lived in a cabin on campus, and the cabin here was definitely a showcase for handwoven textiles. She introduced rag rug making, which used scraps from a Cincinnati factory. and her greatest challenge was sourcing wool and flax for the spinners and weavers. At this time, sales for the products were through the Berea Quarterly and through exhibitions. So the college was taking on kind of more of a role in coordinating weaving and similar crafts with mountain women, but also sourcing materials for them, educating them, and then marketing their goods to a broader audience.
Jenny Lester Hill was the next head of Fireside Industries. She was the first woman to get a BA from Berea College. She was head of the domestic science department, and she was also in charge of laundry. She expanded the weaving program to include students weaving with cotton and linen as well as making lace. Involving those students more actively made them more excited about the work and the history of weaving. They would look for patterns in their family homes. And she retired in 1911.
So now we have reached the period of Anna Ernberg, and she is the person most responsible for developing the program into something successful and into what would eventually become today. So in 1912, Anna Ernberg was hired as the first full-time head of Fireside Industries. She earned $550 for the year and 2 months of vacation, which were unpaid, which would be $18,250 today. She was required to travel in the mountains and to meet mountain women who made the crafts. She also traveled on sales trips to the north to raise money and sell products. So who was Anna Ernberg? She was born in Sweden on June 6, 1874. She immigrated to the U.S. in her mid-20s with her husband and 2 sons, and she taught weaving at Pratt Institute and Columbia University. So she was obviously very skilled. But then her husband died, and she wrote to her friend William Wade, who knew William Goodall Frost, the president of Berea at this time. She told Wade that she wanted to leave the city for the countryside. And she also gave him a pillow and wrote in kind of like a personal note, "Here is a pillow that I made for you as thanks for the photos and maybe more as a tribute to the lover of old hand weaving, as I have been struggling a good many years to have it known and have never met anybody that did care for it as you seem to do." And Wade forwarded this personal letter to Frost, and Frost then hired Ernberg. So I think to both men, it showed that Ernberg really loved the original patterns of mountain women's work, and the 2 men believed that she had a real respect for the traditions of the craft.
So now we'll get into Ernberg's work and impact. So she was incredibly active and raised money to build a log house, which is now the Log House Gallery, where student craft work is exhibited and sold. At the time, it was so huge, it was called the Log Palace, and it cost $15,000 to build, or about $370,000 today. She then raised more money to build a second house for the looms, and she expanded Fireside Industries to include quilts, baskets, and tufted bedspreads. She spent a lot of time traveling and speaking about these crafts. Her travel mostly went to women's groups and organizations. Often one woman would tell or encourage other women to host her. She would speak about the crafts and about the people who made them. So a quote, "Don't rob our mountain women of their inheritance of this kind." Basically, her goal was to revive the craft and keep it alive by creating a demand for it outside of Appalachia. And it worked.
Yes. She also designed a loom, which was smaller than a traditional loom, took up less space, and required no hardware to set up. It also required less force to operate, so it was easier to use. And it made narrower fabric, which was actually perfect because the demand from the new customers was for smaller products like hand towels and purses. The college woodworking department made the looms, and the college also sold them. And Ernberg earned a royalty on them of $5 per loom, which would maybe be, depending on the year that she was selling them, because this was also coming up on the stock market crash. So it would be roughly $75 in today's money, but that's a very general estimate. Ernberg didn't patent her loom because she wanted other weavers to replicate it.
She also oversaw a lot of people. For example, in one year, she oversaw 112 mountain women who made their crafts at home, 23 students who worked half days, 114 students who worked in 2-hour shifts. So it was a tricky balance. Quote, "We all know that student labor cannot be self-supporting, and I do not think we ought to wish it to be, as we surely want to feel that our work with them has some educational value that cannot be counted in dollars and cents."
So this was a shift, And the program was no longer just or even maybe at all to support mountain women and cover costs for students. The program's goal was now to also provide work for the students. And the work that these students did was important. It didn't have to be profitable.
Ernberg, though, was not universally beloved. Quote, Ernberg fought hard for her beliefs and refused to submit graciously to authority. She got into it a few times with the college president who succeeded Frost, William J. Hutchins. She said to him, quote, may I ask you also to believe that even if you will not find me very diplomatic or tactful, that you shall always find that I am honest, frank, and truthful, and that I have no fear at all in promising to be always loyal and faithful to you in the small part that I have in Berea's work.
Yes. The school also tried to take her royalties to her loom, but they failed. So I feel like she really stuck up for herself, and I admire her for that.
Yeah.
Ida Tarbell, a journalist, named her one of 50 outstanding women in America alongside Amelia Earhart, Mary McLeod Bethune, and Helen Keller. Under Ernberg's reign, operations expanded every year except for one during the Depression. Sales increased right up until the stock market crashed in 1929. There was also a shift from buying and working with mountain women to providing work for the students. We kind of touched on this before, but she actually had to decide between doing these two things. So she actually chose to give work to the students rather than buying finished products from local women, especially after the stock market crash. And this broke her heart. In 1931, she wrote, nobody can know how my heart has ached and how I have suffered with them, meaning the mothers, knowing that their needs on account of the drought last summer have been larger and greater than ever.
Ernberg also trained weaving teachers. Although she didn't like teaching weaving, she preferred that people worked as her apprentices. Her students included women who went on to become well-known weaving teachers, like Zeta Benfield, Clara Lawrence, Lou Tate, Lucy Morgan, and Margaret Porter Davison, who wrote a book with over 200 coverlet patterns in it called a Handweaver's Source Book, which people still use.
Ernberg retired in 1936 and died in 1940. Her epitaph read, not until the loom is silent and the shuttle cease to fly shall God unroll the pattern and tell the reason why. The dark threads are as needed in the master's skillful hand as the threads of gold and silver in the pattern he has planned.
That's beautiful.
And it's about
weaving.
It's lovely.
Over the next few decades, student craft emerged from a combination of Fireside Industries with other departments at the college. So this included broomcraft, woodcraft, and ceramics. There's also, as we mentioned above, an important outreach branch.
I feel like this branch of the student craft program is a direct descendant of the traveling and speaking that the Fireside Industries chairs did to raise awareness of Appalachian weaving and create new customers.
The reputation of high quality and an elevated style has remained, as has the tradition of inviting other people to come and teach crafts at the college.
Yes. So now the school offers long-term fellowships where master craftspeople and artists teach and work with the students. They also offer short-term artist residencies, which are housed in the Berea College Craft House. The Craft House sounds really lovely, and it is, quote, being slowly outfitted by student crafts staff, apprentices, visiting artists, and visiting instructors. That is Anna Ernberg, Fireside Industries, and Berea College. What do you think, Sonia?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of my favorite topics I think we've covered.
It really did not end up where I thought it would. I thought I would be writing about the student craft program.
Yeah.
But then when I started reading about it, it was, first of all, not as straightforward as just writing about the craft program, but it was about weaving. And it was also about what it means to preserve a culture's craft and to revive it and how crafts evolve.
Yeah.
And outside influences, shifting audiences, all these things that I thought were so interesting. And I just did not expect.
Yeah. No, because you texted me that it was like going places you didn't expect. And I didn't picture the beginning like that, like the creation of the college like that, with this idea of kind of trying to like force people to hold on to this practice that just puts more labor on them that they don't really want to do anymore, but then finding a way to make it like work for them.
Yes. Yeah. I think it's very interesting when people come in to teach mountain people about mountain crafts.
Oh yeah,
I
like
think
people from
that
like
I can,
yeah.
yes, like Candice Wheeler, who's also very interesting. I feel like we could do an episode on her. She's quite like accomplished, like an amazing artist, an amazing weaver. But yes, I think I would have said that doesn't count as really preserving the craft, but I think you can, it's the craft can evolve, right? Like
Yeah.
these things change. Yeah. And people have always been coming in and bringing new influences to crafts. So here they're just kind of doing it intentionally. Any final thoughts on Berea College?
I'd like to go see it. I think it'd be cool to like see the crafts.
Yeah, that's a great call. That would be really fun. Field trip. All right. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to tell us about your culture or heritage craft, we would love to hear about it, how it's evolved, how you have preserved it, how you have let it go. We would love to hear about all of it. Or if you went to Berea College, we would love to hear about that too. You can email us at handmadehistoryhosts, that's HOSTS at gmail.com. You can follow us on Instagram at Handmade History Podcast. And you can also find us on Tumblr. I just got on there, so if you're on Tumblr, come find us at Handmade History Podcast. We will follow you and be friends with you and reblog you. It's so much fun. I love it there. It's like the happiest part of the internet. All right. Thanks so much for listening.
Goodbye.
Sorry. Yeah, you said it right.
Auspices.
It's a stupid word.